Hello and welcome to another episode of Earth911's Sustainability in Your Ear, the podcast conversation about accelerating the transition to a sustainable carbon neutral society. I'm your host, Mitch Ratcliffe. Thank you so much for joining us today. There are between 75 and 199 million tons of plastic waste floating in and polluting the world's oceans, according to the World Economic Forum. And the Gyres Institute reports that the volume of plastic entering the seas is doubling every 6 years. In the midst of waves of greenwashing claims, there are genuine efforts to develop circular, sustainable packaging. And today we're going to talk with Vanessa Coleman, CEO of Oceanworks, which collects ocean plastics for recycling that it sells to companies that are committed to using post-consumer recycled plastics in new products and packaging. Oceanworks has developed a network of partners that collect and recycle plastics found on beaches and in waterways around the world, which can be identified by the Oceanworks Guaranteed label. These programs' environmental, social, and recycling practices are reviewed regularly by Oceanworks. And Oceanworks can provide end-to-end audits of its plastic supply chain. Now, this largely happens behind the scenes, away from our view as consumers, but it's essential to ensuring that first, recycled ocean plastic is what it claims to be. And second, it helps companies make and keep their ESG commitments. In early June, Oceanworks introduced a new plastic footprint tool for its customers, those are for large brands and plastic packaging users, to calculate their environmental impact and also offset it through Oceanworks Impact Plus program. The Oceanworks Guaranteed certified recycled plastics are used in Glad to Be Green products, Sperry sea-cycled sneakers, Delta faucets, Ocean plastic showerhead, and many other products. While shoppers can browse these products at the Oceanworks website, the real action happens in the company's online materials catalog. It sells recycled PET, that's number 1 plastic, HDPE, that's number 2 plastic, and polypropylene, which is number 5 plastic, as well as recycled yarns and fabrics, bottles, and zippers made from ocean plastics. And these can be purchased by companies and integrated into their products. Product designers and the teams responsible for packaging get access to a wide range of materials that contribute to a cleaner world as long as they continue to be recycled responsibly. We've talked on recent shows about the evolving national strategy to prevent plastic pollution, the appearance of advanced recycling technologies that promise to make plastic as recyclable as metals with little loss of material during each recycling process, and about the health and environmental impacts of plastics and the additives that they contain. As one of the first large-scale producers of recycled plastics, Oceanworks faces these questions every day. So let's jump into the ocean plastics problem and see what progress can be made. You can learn more about Oceanworks at oceanworks.co. Oceanworks, all one word, no space, no dash, folks. Oceanworks.co. Welcome to the show, Vanessa. How are you doing today?
Good. How are you, Mitch?
Doing well. Thank you so much for getting up early and talking to me about Oceanworks. I wanted to start off. Oceanworks was founded in 2018. Rob Iannelli was the founder. He recognized the rising demand for recycled plastics, but why the focus on ocean plastics? Is it simply for a better differentiated product?
Well, the focus on ocean really came, and like you say, Rob was the original founder, so I was not there at that time. We joined up together in 2018 to start working on the idea for Oceanworks, but he actually started working in the ocean plastic space a few years prior. Both of us have a passion for the ocean and had the opportunity to do quite a bit of travel and seen the way that over the past 10 years, plastic waste has just been accumulating in the environment in emerging markets. And ultimately, a portion of that waste ends up in the ocean where there isn't strong waste management. He felt like it was an opportunity to kind of educate folks about this problem and how, share how they could be part of the solution. So the very first thing that happened prior to the founding of Oceanworks was the creation of a product, an ocean plastic product made from waste from Haiti, some sunglasses. And that product was very successful in its own right. Rob worked on that under a brand called Norton Point. And after that development, started to get contacted by a lot of larger brands that were looking to see how they might be able to do something similar, basically tap into this resource in the, in sense of plastic waste is, that is, causing a lot of environmental problems globally. So that those conversations sparked the idea for Oceanworks, which is basically moving beyond kind of a niche consumer product and looking how we could really scale the impact of the work. And that is kind of what catalyzed the founding of Oceanworks.
And what brought you to the company?
Similarly, I think my journey was similar to Rob's, except for that I had come from sustainability startups previously, but also was very familiar with the problem and interested in, I guess, the challenge of trying to create value in this large and accelerating waste stream, such that there might be some market incentives for the removal of it from the environment. And, I think, as we'll talk about today, a lot of that challenge still remains. There's a lot of different waste out there. Some of it's recyclable, some of it's not. And as additives and multi-layers and different things are increasingly incorporated into the waste streams, there continues to be a challenge in making that waste valuable and accelerating the removal of it from the environment.
So what kind of consumers do you find are buying products using Oceanworks Guaranteed plastic? Is it concentrated in younger people, or is there truly a multi-generational interest in post-consumer recycled plastic content?
I do think people of all ages are looking for more sustainable options. We have found that most of the brand partners we're working with are targeting those kind of 40 and under millennial Gen Z type audiences with their ocean and ocean bound plastic programs. But I do think it is fairly universal. And there's also a sense among the older generation that, they would like to transition to more sustainable and circular economies. So, I think we do see the demand across the spectrum. One really interesting thing that has been occurring, I would say increasingly so over the past couple of years, is some brands are actually hesitant to champion their work in this space because of concerns about backlash.
Right.
And, I think it is an evolving space. The regulatory environment is still catching up. There's not real consistent standards globally. And so there have been cases where brands thought they were getting one thing and they were getting something else. And, maybe consumers like what they're doing, but think it's too small. So brands are actually concerned about kind of negative feedback from this kind of work. And so that's something that we've been working with our brand partners on quite a bit to try to make sure it's a successful program for them.
So when you say backlash, do you mean backlash about the fact that it is claimed to be something that it turns out not to be, which your program seeks to solve with auditing? Or are you talking about backlash like the anti-woke backlash?
More like, well, a combination. So definitely making claims and not, fully being able to back those is something that people are afraid of. That's something that we can solve easily. I think the other problem we see is, obviously there's a lot of brands that produce plastic at scale. Like, for example, we work with Clorox Glad, and they're doing some great work in this space, and they have been championing it. And I'm really proud of the work that we are doing with them. But they are taking a risk in doing that, they'll immediately get, this isn't enough, you're just trying to, that kind of thing. And so how do you work with them to grow a program that is impactful over time? And also get started. I hate to see brands that are afraid to start just because the scale of the problem that needs to be addressed is so large.
This is really interesting because I've seen this problem of the perfect being the enemy of progress in many different contexts. And of course, we can't just transform everything all at once in one fell swoop. So steps are important. So you're talking with brands about whether or not they should even speak to this because of the appearance that they are greenwashing. Do you find that companies would go ahead and do it anyway, use ocean sourced plastic simply to do the right thing, and then maybe later on when somebody asks, by the way, we
Yeah.
do get this from the ocean. Is that the better strategy that you recommend for
Well,
that?
we are finding that brands are quietly incorporating more sustainable materials, whether it's PCR or ocean plastic. They're building it into their programs, making it part of their infrastructure, and then looking at when is the right time to tell that story. And I think that is a very valid long-term strategy. One of the challenges is that then kind of the flywheel doesn't get started for the removal of this waste because people don't know that other people are doing it. For us, we always try to defer to the brands in terms of what their preference is about how they talk about this. But it's been an interesting shift. When we very first came into the space back in 2018, 2019, people were very eager to talk about their programs, even if they were very token. And now we see brands doing larger things, taking bigger steps, but maybe waiting to market against them. So, it's an interesting evolution. I'm not sure, exactly where it will go, but hopefully it will get to the point where brands can confidently talk about it and really make a shift in the way people are purchasing.
So you wouldn't necessarily see the Oceanworks certified label on something that contains your materials because the brand chose not to promote it?
In some cases, that is the case. The brand might choose to incorporate materials and not promote it. In other cases, you do see it there. So I think it just depends on how the brand wants to position. And one of the things we see too over time is that, people may start just incorporating a little bit of material, and then once they're rolling with the program, then they might start to market it. So it really just depends on the brand partner.
So tell us about your collection network. How does it work and who's involved?
So we work with, I would say the linchpins of the network are the recyclers globally. So we work in about 15 different countries, all emerging markets, where there is a high proportion of mismanaged waste, so a lack of recycling infrastructure. And what we are looking to do essentially is create demand for that and create value in international markets. So we will work with processors, so the recyclers themselves, and collectors and aggregators as well, just depending on the dynamics of that specific market. And we will look to validate the quality of the material, validate the collection zone, look at the social and environmental compliance, the kinds of things that a brand needs to see to confidently buy material that's sourced in a geography where they are less familiar with working.
So it's no small feat to organize and monitor a global network of plastic collection partners, and you've built this plastic action platform. How does that work? What kind of information does it display, and who generally would use that? Is it a product designer that is making a material selection, or someone else?
Again, it varies widely. A lot of our first touch points are with product designers and engineers that have some sort of sustainability mandate from the larger corporation and are looking for options and alternatives. We also do find actually kind of the more small to mid-sized companies leadership, whether it's the whole the overall product manager, marketing manager, or even the CEO kind of engaging with the strategy. And that is where we find that the platform is most valuable. When we work that way, what we can do is come in, look from a plastic footprint perspective across the business, and try to identify some of the lowest hanging fruit for taking action in terms of either offsets or incorporating recycled content based on kind of what we know exists within the sourcing side. So, I think there are a lot of different ways to engage. Sometimes brands come in like our Clorox program where they knew specifically what they were looking for. They wanted a PCR that could work in a film application in a certain geography. And, it was just a matter of identifying options within the network and validating those. And other times it's a lot more open-ended and really thinking about what are the opportunities within their business to start to take action against plastic pollution.
Now, when I look at the catalog on the Oceanworks site, it seems to be largely concentrated in plastics 1, 2, and 5. What kinds of products can you make with those plastics?
We see a lot of different things. I mean, obviously you have the kind of basic bottles and, the stuff that you can do with our pet. But we've also got a pretty good business in the more durable side. So you didn't mention this, but we have a good offering of nylons, so PA6, and then also polypropylenes. And so those might be used in office furniture, just like other durable kind of hard goods. And then we also have things going into films that I'd mentioned in fabrics. So there is a range of end applications. At the end of the day, plastic is used in almost everything, and recycled plastic, as you well know, can be used in a pretty wide range of products. And frankly, a lot of the materials within the network are no different than kind of a standard PCR. It's just a PCR that comes with a story, a sourcing location story. Of course, there are the unique streams as well, like fishing nets and things like that, that might have properties that would be a little bit different than a standard recycled plastic.
So can a recycled rPET from the ocean be used in food grade plastics in the next generation?
It could. I would say that we do not have a material stream that looks like that in the volume that would be relevant for food grade bottling. So a lot of the programs that we look at in that space are really ocean bound, and I think that that's an important distinction. So that is waste that may be collected on the land, but in places where it's in canals, it's in environments that are likely to end up in the ocean. And we try to be very transparent, both with our brands and encouraging them to be transparent with the consumers about what is ocean bound, what is truly ocean sourced. Because at the end of the day, what we have found is that consumers are glad to see brands looking at making an impact. They just want to be told what things actually are. And so where we're working with ocean bound programs, we've created a classification system to call that out very visibly so that everybody within the brand and hopefully within their consumer audience knows exactly what they're getting.
So do you also find that the brands you're working with rethink their approach to recycling? Because of course, when you make more plastic, you need to recycle more plastic. Are they also beginning to extend their outreach and education practices to prevent the plastic from ending up in the oceans again?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and it's something that we worry about quite a bit. But it's not we are in the business of getting plastic back into the material stream. And so we do not work too directly with brands on those programs, but we see a lot of brands thinking about it. And where we see it is in the product design. So, where you're thinking about making things suitable for recycling, thinking about not blending, thinking about how you're creating the product such that it can more easily flow into the recycling stream. And the other place that we look at that side is around, we have a whole program which we called Oceanworks Impact, which is the recovery of non-commercially recyclable plastic. So things that are too expensive to collect and return to the waste stream. And so they just don't get collected. And in some cases, those things are recyclable. And in other cases, they may not be, but they still need to be properly disposed. And so that is a growing area that we often work on brands with in conjunction with their material programs.
There's a lot of ins and outs in the recycling of plastic process, and I want to get into that in the next part of the conversation, but we're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back. Hey, extended producer responsibility change makers, let's unite. Meet me and the Earth911 team in Portland, Oregon this September at the 2023 U.S. Product Stewardship Forum, the nation's only conference dedicated to EPR legislation and best practices. The circular economy is being crafted today, brick by brick, with EPR legislation, and packaging recycling efforts are leading the way. 2022 saw unprecedented momentum, with 18 states considering over 60 EPR bills, and 6 became law. This year in Portland, you'll find exclusive insights from globally recognized EPR experts. The Product Stewardship Institute invites you, the movers who will shake their regional recycling and composting systems with new ideas. Network. Hone your EPR knowledge and form strategic alliances to drive the circular results this world needs. Now is the time for producer responsibility. So join us at the 2023 U.S. Product Stewardship Forum in Portland, Oregon. That happens from September 11th to 14th. Register today at productstewardship.us. Product stewardship is all one word, no space, no dash, productstewardship.us. Be a part of the solution because stewardship starts with you. And we are back to continue the discussion with Vanessa Coleman, CEO of Los Angeles-based Oceanworks, which sells recycled plastics collected from beaches, waterways, and oceans around the globe. So, Vanessa, as you look at this as a plastics company, do you endorse the idea of mandatory extended producer responsibility in the United States? Should plastic manufacturers or the brands that use their plastics be held responsible for collecting and processing costs?
So I would say that I'm much more familiar with emerging markets, but I think the same mindsets apply globally. And I do think that having some element of producer responsibility and thus specific funds earmarked for the management of plastic waste is a good, I guess, mechanism to create the incentives needed for the proper management of that waste. And there's a lot of different ways to go about it. People are looking at taxation of new virgin plastics. Different countries are looking, and states, frankly, in the US are looking at extended producer responsibility schemes. And I think what that has the potential to do is create a bucket of money that can go to essentially the recovery of this waste that is ending up in the environment. So as we look at the broader problem, I think something is needed. And like I'd mentioned, we are already working in that space through Oceanworks Impact, basically helping brands offset their footprint by funding the removal, which is very akin to what you would see in an extended producer responsibility scheme, but that is much more holistic, and it's something that can happen at a regional or national level. I think the challenges are around the effective implementation of those types of programs. And I suspect that we will continue to see challenges around that over the next 5 or 10 years. But the more we can get to regulatory consistency, I think the more effective corporations will be at operating within that environment.
So the Environmental Protection Agency has released a draft national strategy to prevent plastic pollution. And I'm curious, have you thought about what role the government can play to produce the most environmentally responsible approach to plastic packaging and recycling in the United States? What do you think they ought to do?
I think it's a challenge. And I mean, and as I mentioned on the prior question, I do think the more that we can establish regulatory consistency, the better. What we're seeing today.
Does that mean setting goals, for instance, and then holding people accountable for those goals?
Well, I think the holding people accountable is where the challenge lies. I mean, there's a number of states are leading in this, and there's a bunch of goals out there, but there's mixed results on the compliance, and I think that's what we see globally as well. So where we're starting to both look at, this national strategy, and then there's also the global plastics treaty that's being negotiated. And I think if we can get to some standards, as we had eventually done in carbon, it took 10 years to get there, but now you do see the kind of momentum in addressing climate challenges that you would hope to see around plastics. And, I think plastics is 5 or maybe 10 years behind on that. And, we have a big challenge in front of us in terms of catching up. And we see that in the way that brands are thinking about it too. They have regulations on the climate side that are driving aggressive investment. And on the plastics front, for the most part, it's a little bit more wait and see because there isn't this clarity around, which things are going to be priorities. Like, do they need to be incorporating recycled content? Do they need to make it recyclable? Are things going to be banned? Like, what is going to happen? I think there's definitely a little bit of a wait and see mode still at this time, which is unfortunate.
Well, you mentioned bans, and we were talking earlier about composites, multi-layered packaging, and so forth. The EPA has actually asked if any plastic should be banned, and you've talked about some that aren't recyclable or at least not feasibly recyclable with a profit. Do you endorse banning something like number 3, PVC, which is usually the moisture barrier in a chip bag, for instance, or extended polystyrene, or some of the plastics that, although they have special capabilities, are in the number 7 category, because that's everything that came along after the numbering system started? I mean, should we simplify the entire process and get rid of a few of these materials?
I think there are trade-offs. I would say, as Oceanworks, we definitely look at it as a hierarchy. So reuse first, then use stuff that's recyclable, and then only use other materials as absolutely necessary. And of course, if it's reviewed in detail and deemed that the harms being created by a material are greater than the value, I would definitely endorse eliminating that from the stream. It will decomplicate things and make things simpler. I also think that if there are bans or other taxes or forms of restricting certain materials, it'll create a market for alternatives and innovation. And I do think there remains a fairly substantial opportunity for that around plastics. This is a ubiquitous material that has been widely produced and widely used in everything. I don't think it's going away, but I think that there are ways to use it better and use it smarter. And hopefully some of these types of policy measures might drive the industry in that direction.
Are there particular resins you think we ought to be using for consumer goods packaging that would enable easier recycling? Should we settle on 1, 2, and 5, for instance? Or...
I mean, that is obviously what we encourage. I think that is where, those materials are fairly easily recyclable. You can get a lot of cycles out of them. And further, there's infrastructure in place for executing that. I mean, I think that's one of the challenges as well with, you say everything in category number 7, it's all the new stuff there wasn't titles for, but it's also all the stuff that recycling infrastructure is not necessarily in place for. So the more we can simplify, I think the better. And we do see our brand partners working towards that. And we, get a lot of requests for, can we, try this in this application where maybe they were using, polystyrene or something like that before. But then, there is the challenge. And I think that's frankly why we see a lot of demand for nylon, because you still need engineering resins. And, there will continue to be a demand for that. And, what is the right material to be used? I frankly would probably leave it to the experts on the material front, but I totally agree that if we can simplify it and focus on resins that are more recyclable, it will make the whole industry more sustainable and circular.
The other simplification question, it also is a health issue for a lot of our listeners, is the question about banning certain additives that create other features, mechanical functional features of the plastic, like phthalates, PFAS, BPA. Do you sell plastic that, or do you, excuse me, Doug, I'm going to cut back to where I started to stammer. Okay, so when I started going do, here we go. Does Oceanworks catalog include products that have those additives in them?
So we endeavor to exclude those types of additives from products that we offer. I would say that they do create challenges in the recycling stream, and they create challenges for a lot of our partners.
Should they be banned for that reason?
It would certainly simplify things, and it would make things safer for recycled content. I think if they were banned or limited, because where things are marked as recyclable that contain that, you get a trace amount in a batch of material, and then you have trace amount in a truckload in a rail car, and then it goes out in a whole product line. And so obviously there's a lot of testing that's done to try to validate that those types of additives are not in the recycled streams that are being used for human contact, human consumption applications. But I think that I suspect it will benefit the whole sector to reduce and potentially eliminate toxic additives.
Another area that, and we've talked with a number of these companies on the show, that is emerging and very controversial, is the notion of advanced chemical or molecular recycling in plastics. And I'm wondering if you've looked at partnering with those organizations to deliver a more useful, sustainable plastic, or do you think that their environmental impact makes them unsustainable?
I think at a high level, the jury on advanced recycling is still out. There is, I think, an opportunity. As I mentioned, there's these non-recyclable streams that we definitely encounter quite frequently in our work. And so what are the options for those? So, in our mind, there's kind of a hierarchy. Can it be reused? Can it be mechanically recycled? And then you got the leftovers. So at that point, you can burn it, you can landfill it, maybe you can move it to advanced recycling. And certainly those types of programs are getting funded and they're looking for feedstock. So, there may be some opportunities there. It's our understanding that from a carbon footprint perspective, is fairly similar to what you would see from a new virgin plastic. But at the end of the day, the waste is not in the environment and the carbon footprint of incinerating is worse. So, I think there are some trade-offs there. We hate to see material that could be mechanically recycled going into advanced recycling.
Okay.
And I know there have been some questions about what quality is really needed. I mean, you can't just throw all the junk in chemical recycling or advanced recycling, as you're calling it, and expect to get a quality output. So, what level of quality is needed, and how can you manage that? I think there's a lot of questions out there. I know that there's a lot of folks working on it. And from our perspective, what we're just evaluating is whether the kind of non-commercially recyclable streams that we are encountering could find a new life through those types of processes.
You're making decisions about what kinds of material to buy and what to send the material in, what process to send the material in. What would you consider proof positive that a chemical or molecular recycling program could play a productive role in your supply chain, the one that you're auditing? I mean, is there scientific findings? It obviously has to go beyond simple economics.
Yeah, I mean, right now it's fairly exploratory. It's really about what is the best end of life for something, that is out there. And if, a lot of our principle is about creating value in these supply chains. So if there is a way to take something that would otherwise be incinerated or landfilled and get it back into new products, you're thus reducing the need for new plastics. Yeah. And so maybe there would be an opportunity around that. I think the economics have to work. I think the chain of custody needs to be there to some extent, but that is happening through kind of a mass balance approach in the chemical recycling, which, there's, again, it's still emerging, but I think that there could be some opportunities, but I do think that the term recycling is a bit confusing in the context of advanced recycling, because it really is, in my mind, another form of disposal that is leading to something new. But I also understand why it's being called recycling, because it's, you're taking what is essentially a plastic waste and you're making a plastic input. You're making a material stream that can become a plastic. So, that in a sense it's closing a loop, but it's certainly not, making something similar from similar. I think it's an interesting space.
Yeah, and thinking about your approach, where you recycle, and then the choice of reducing the use of unrecyclable or at least not financially viable recycling can drive the entire industry towards better solutions. Maybe chemical recycling fits, maybe it doesn't. Those are choices we're going to have to figure out in the future. As you think about, and obviously you're working with collection all over the world, what can we learn from the things that you have seen in an emerging economy to drive a better and more efficient recycling infrastructure here in the States, potentially to keep all the plastic out of those regions too? Yeah,
that's a great point. I mean, I think one of the things that is fairly poorly understood is that a lot of the plastic that ends up in the ocean actually originated in Western markets,
Yeah.
and was shipped overseas. And so, then they get some stuff that's valuable and they get all the rest, and the rest gets disposed of, and some of it ends up in the ocean. So I do think that if we can strengthen, you see it happening in Europe, or it's happening here to some extent, the recycling infrastructure locally, it
Mhm.
does help the whole problem. And I think what I would say as the primary things we might be able to take for the U.S., that we've seen in emerging markets is, there are quite a number of waste streams that can be economically recycled, and I think there has been so much confusing information over time about whether recycling even makes sense, and particularly plastics recycling, that some consistent and coherent communication about that would be very helpful. And also, if we can establish some consistency across locations, I know I go on vacation to different locations in the US, and the recycling is totally different. And that is very, very confusing to consumers. And so if we can establish, people want to do the right thing, but they also don't want to feel like they're just, washing their peanut butter jars and wasting their time. It takes people time. It's like hard to recycle. It's not as easy as just throwing everything in the bin. And so I think there's a need to get some consistent, clear communications about what makes a difference, and continue to support. And, I see this happening, but the development of new recycling facilities locally, and that's supported by continued purchase of PCR and recycled content and products. So, all those things need to go together. If someone's going to invest in a facility, they need to have supply and they need to have demand to make their economics work. And I think all of that is there. It just needs to come together.
But thinking about the way that you have an end-to-end life cycle auditing capability, should we be thinking about doing that with all plastics in some way, and using labels so that the consumer can find out that it really is happening? Because we get 20,000, 30,000 queries about this literally a day at Earth911.
Yes, we should. I think it's something that we believe in strongly, and it is a capability that we've even explored trying to deploy in the US. I think we have this blockchain-based track and trace platform that follows the material through the supply chain. It's very needed in places where the supply chain isn't well understood, but you can obviously see, even here in the States, the supply chain for recycled content isn't well understood. And it might be helpful for people to know, hey, these, the bottle that you're buying came from, the Western region, and in this, tell the story a little bit more and help people engage with it. I think that's something that when people see a, recycled content label on a bottle, it's kind of generic. And so is there a way that we can give it a little more life and connect the actions end to end for people using these types of tools? I think the opportunity is there, and it goes beyond just the, charismatic stories of fishing nets recovered from the ocean, and really can apply to buying local. People think about that now. Like, if you tell a story of, hey, this stuff was sourced from like the Northeast region, you're in the Northeast, like you're helping solve this problem locally. I think there is a big opportunity for that. And frankly, the tools we built could be deployed for that. So maybe there'll be an opportunity for us to work on it at some point in time.
Well, we might want to talk to you about that, but let me, in closing, because this has been a fascinating conversation, I'm wondering if you envision a time when land-based collection programs are effective enough that ocean plastics are no longer really an environmental threat, or basically, are you in a permanent industry of cleaning up our oceans?
Yes, I envision that time. And I also think I'm in a permanent industry of cleaning up plastic. So our mission as an organization is that, we turn off the tap on ocean plastic pollution. And for us, that everything we've built can continue to serve the ecosystem, whether or not the materials from the ocean. And so, I am hopeful that over the next 10 years, we will get to that stage where, there is, like you mentioned at the outset, quite a bit of plastic in the ocean. I think that is an expensive but solvable problem if we are able to stop new plastic from going in. So I think, if we can work across nations and across the world to create the infrastructure to keep plastic out of the ocean, it's a win. And, I'm hopeful that we will get there, certainly in the next 10, 15 years or so. But there's a lot of challenges that remain ahead of us.
Well, I hope that you succeed, because it would be a very good thing. How can listeners follow along with what you're doing?
Well, so I think the easiest way, we have a blog that we keep at oceanworks.co. So that's our website. You can learn more about our work there, both on the resins and recycled content side, and also the offsets and impact. And then, I'm on Twitter, VL Green, I think my handle is. Oceanworks is on Twitter. Rob's on Twitter, the original founder. So you can find us there. And we have an Instagram as well. So, definitely look out for us. And I would say keep an eye out for a lot of changes in the space broadly, because, like you say, there are a lot of new regulations coming in. Brands are starting to take notice, and I'm hopeful that there will be an industry shift over the next 5 to 10 years, which hopefully will create a ocean plastic free future. We shall see.
Godspeed. Thank you very much, Vanessa. I really appreciate the time today.
Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it, Mitch. It's wonderful to be here.
We've been talking with Oceanworks CEO Vanessa Coleman, and you can learn more about Oceanworks at oceanworks.co. Oceanworks is all one word, no space, no dash, and that's .co, oceanworks.co. Look for the Oceanworks Guaranteed label to identify products made using plastic collected from beaches, waterways, and the world's oceans. As we heard, economics plays a critical role in the development of the recycling system. It always has. But as more complex plastics and packaging that use multiple layers of different plastics emerge, we make the processing of these materials more complex. Reducing the number of plastics and additives in plastics can lower the cost of collecting, sorting, and processing these materials. That means product designers in every industry that uses plastic, and not just those responsible for designing beverage and shampoo bottles. Every product designer needs to make environmentally informed decisions when selecting the plastics that they use. Can it be easily recycled anywhere it might be used? If local recycling capabilities needed to process the plastic are not available, can they be added? And can they be added affordably by the municipality, or does the industry need to contribute to that effort? And who should pay for the infrastructure to recycle for these products? Designers are responsible for the environmental impact of their work, and Oceanworks' catalog of recycled plastics is an interesting and important tool to begin exploring these questions before making and distributing something that consumers will not be able to recycle locally. Of course, we will continue to talk with innovators in this market. It is going to be a long and important story for us all to learn and follow. I hope you'll take a moment to share this podcast or any of the more than 400 interviews we've produced on sustainability in your ear. Please write a review on your favorite podcast platform to help your neighbors find us. You folks are the amplifiers that spread more ideas so we have less waste. Tell your friends, family, and coworkers that they can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, or any of the fine purveyors of podcast goodness they prefer. Thank you, folks. Thank you so much for your support. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe. This is Earth911, and we will be back with another innovator interview soon. In the meantime, folks, take care of yourself, take care of one another, and let's all take care of this beautiful planet of ours. Have a green day.